Good evening.
Hi.
Hey, guys.
Greetings.
Hey, Bob. Let's see. All right, so we've got everyone except for Melody.
Except for Melody. Is she coming tonight?
I didn't hear otherwise, so she might just be running a minute late. All right. Becky, I was having a hard time trying to find the OPEB report, the last one. I feel like can you refresh my memory? Did we chatted about it sort of briefly at an earlier meeting this year, or 2022, right? And then we had that presentation. I don't know why I was having trouble finding.
We'll see what I can bring up.
Yeah, I think when we get to that topic, I think we might want to.
I don't think it was ever sent out. I don't remember seeing it.
So we had that briefing with the
Oh, yeah, that, but
the authors of the report, and I assumed that PowerPoint would have been something, but I
think it was all sent out.
yeah, I think it was. For some reason I was doing I must have been using all the wrong search terms because I couldn't find it.
Google's good like that. It should
Yeah.
be called a Google Hider,
All right.
not Finder.
Okay, I think we can get started. So I kind of threw this agenda together, but I think there's probably a couple things that I left out. I don't know if anybody wanted to have any other topics. I know that, like, for instance, Bob and I can share some information about capital planning, sort of progress, and what requests have been submitted. But there may be other topics that I missed in our agenda. Is there anything else that folks wanted to discuss?
AJ?
Give me once. I want to look at the agenda real quick. I was jumping around.
Sure.
The stuff that Susie set from the elementary school might be
Yeah.
worth talking about.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll touch base. Susie.
And I think there's 3 sets of minutes.
Yeah.
I'm
I have
confused.
this.
Yeah, 3 sets.
I think there's
Three
two.
sets. There's
Well, there's
two.
the-
I think there's
The
two.
four-town meeting,
Yeah.
then
That's-
the one we just had. Oh,
Okay.
maybe I didn't send out the one we just had. No,
Right.
probably.
No, and you haven't.
I-
1217 and 1221. Those are the two.
Okay.
So yeah, Becky, did you have something?
It's fine. I know that the select board can only approve minutes that are listed on the agenda because when we were so rogue to expand beyond that, we were hit with, a violation, and, we had to report to the ethics committee, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that's going to happen to you guys. I was starting to say something, but I don't think
Okay.
I need to.
It applies. Okay. All right. And then Bob. did you-
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't know if this is the right night for us to discuss this, but
Sure.
something that really interests me, and I don't think we've really discussed it extensively on this committee, is what our responsibilities are vis-a-vis all this federal money that's coming down the pike. Like, we've had this ARPA money, we've had other money that's come through town. And then I understand that there's been a bill signed recently, an infrastructure bill, which provides for more money going to municipalities. It seems to me, from my perspective, that the finance committee should have a role in reviewing how this money, reviewing how this money might be spent or not spent. And we should be prepared to, in some way, our committee should be prepared to address this, because this has financial implications for the taxpayer. This is a financial matter. I think it falls under our responsibilities, and we haven't really done it yet in any systematic way. And I think it's something we got to talk about. So I hope that we can talk about it at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose it's come up in topics, I mean, discussions about specific projects like the school roof, for example, but I think it sounds like you're talking about more of kind of big picture, kind of what's our role and what's the process for FinCom's input on those topics. So,
Yes.
okay. All right. So let's see if we have time for it. Let's add it tonight. If not, we can add it to the next agenda. Susie?
The other piece is maybe talking about drafting a letter to our new rep and other legislators about our concerns for how the fair share money gets distributed, and other things, other topics that would apply to them.
Okay.
Susie, excuse me, is it your impression that there were no guarantees that fair share money was actually going to go to towns and schools and things of that sort?
Well, higher education is going to lobby for it. Education and transportation, those are the two headings, and we need to make sure that we're under part of that, especially with the special ed out of district placements going up 14%. We need to be advocating for either more circuit breaker money or that money.
Mhm.
But it was never guaranteed. That was the problem with the fair share. It's one of the reasons why. Yeah,
Well, the
go
law
ahead.
said it goes to education, but as Susie said,
Yeah.
they're not going to. They have been. Higher ed has been lobbying big time. It's been in the papers. They've been, and I've heard nothing about DESE lobbying. So I think a letter is a really good idea.
Yeah.
And we should probably distribute it to the region, and some people in the region, the other school committees, and say, this is what we're doing.
Mhm.
Maybe they'll use it as a template and they'll start sending letters, because
Yeah.
it's easy to say we should reach out, but everybody's trying to look for the words. And if there was a template in front of me, it would be so much easier for me personally, just shoot it right along.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good idea. Okay. Let's make sure we kind of at least assign kind of responsibility or next steps for doing that, because I think we all agree that's a good idea. Okay. All right, so let's start with minutes. So I think there's correction to the agenda. So we'll do the January 4th minutes at our next meeting, but we have to do the 4 towns, which was what? That was the 17th, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so we've got to review and approve let's start with the December 17th 4 town meeting minutes. Does everybody have that?
Yes.
So that was, I think, sent on December 22nd, if anybody's looking for it. Any comments? Questions?
Crazy.
Looked fine to me.
Yeah, me too.
Okay,
Fine.
all right. So I'll make a motion then, seeing no comments, to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second.
Okay.
Overnight aside.
Melanie, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Chartier abstain.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosher, aye.
Walton, I.
All right. Motion passes 6-0, 1 abstention, and then we have the minutes from December 21st. Anybody want to? I've got a couple things, but let me open it up first. Any comments, corrections, questions? Jim?
Yeah, this is very minor. On 2D, during our discussion, people searched online for aftermarket. Aftermarket, I feel should be changed to replacement. It's minor technicality, that's all, because it was actually, didn't come from an aftermarket source.
And we were looking at all sources.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just,
Yeah.
other than that, I'm fine with the minutes.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm good.
All right, I think there's a typo on 2A. The sentence starts without electricity, the firefighter pagers don't work properly. The garage doors would have to be opened manually, I think it's missing a word in there. And then I was wondering if folks thought it'd be worth mentioning that I think and I didn't see it in here, I think we mentioned the possibility of requesting or having a warrant at annual town meeting to transfer those funds, that amount of funds that we allocated for a new generator back to FinCom reserves. Did I
It was in the
remember that correctly?
I think it was in the discussion, but not a motion.
Right, no, it definitely wasn't a motion.
Okay.
I just, it's one of those things like I wanted to make sure we remember, that idea when it comes time to prepare for annual town meeting. George?
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, I think what we said was if our FinCom reserve looks like it's at risk,
Right.
then we would do that. So I think the trigger will be if the FinCom reserve before annual town meeting, a month before annual town meeting ends up being at $10,000 or, some low number, then we would obviously have to address it.
Okay.
So what is so I have if a discussion of if the FinCom reserve is at risk, we would transfer. Well, what would we do? Because ATM is a new ballgame.
Yeah, I don't think we have to address it now. I think like AJ just said, we just need to, make sure that if it's needed, that we consider doing that. And like I just said, I think if income reserve balance gets depleted, probably because of legal bills, then we would know. It would trigger us to do something.
Right.
So what's the do something part?
I think it would mean sort of boosting what again in this scenario would be low FinCom reserves. I think it would mean boosting our FY24.
No, it would be. I think it would be to replenish our FY23 amount.
Yeah, I think maybe what you're talking about is sometimes we have to resolve financial issues to clean up the end of the year budget, and we need our reserves in order to do that. So can that change be made retroactively back to our reserve at town meeting? Is that the question here? Because if we needed money to clean up to finish the budget after town meeting, we might need reserves, and if we don't have any,
Okay.
where does
So
that money come?
Post ATM funds might have to get back into the FinCom reserve to finish out the year to July.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's
Is
what
that
I'm
an
saying.
option, Becky?
There's an alternative if we really are in a pickle. You can do line-to-line transfers if you're working with the select board. So FinCom with the select board can do line-to-line transfers if we didn't have sufficient funds available in the reserve.
Since we didn't talk about all these details, can we just say there was some concern about making sure the finance committee's reserve funded was addressed if it got too low?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Yeah, that's great. All right, but that was useful to hear that info. So Becky, you're saying, so if needed, select board could authorize that line-to-line transfer.
Well, it takes the FinCom and the select board voting together.
Together. Gotcha. Okay, good to know. All right. Any other comments or questions on the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll
Second.
second.
Second,
George, you want to kick us off?
Arvanetti side.
Chartier, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, I.
Cashew, aye.
Mosher, I.
Walton, I.
Okay, great. All right. The next topic on the agenda was our recent free cash certification. I don't know if, I think everybody got an email from Becky, I think just
Mhm.
before our last meeting. I'm just pulling it up right now. Let's see.
January 4th,
Yeah.
email.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds right. And so we've got a certified free cash amount of $1,062,240. Were there any questions about this, or was there any context to share or any comments that folks wanted to make? All right, George.
Yeah, so the reason it's on here is I just related our situation, our new certified cash balance to the warrant articles that are going to be presented at special town meeting. Those two warrant articles amounted to 155,551, and we're at 1,062,000. So that would bring us down, if they're approved, it'll bring us down to roughly $907,000. So the schedule, the CapEx schedule that I put together last year, and we used to figure out how to fund last year's purchases, Vader, school, highway truck in particular, and of course the library. I took that spreadsheet and I've started a new one for the new year. And so I basically put the two items at the special town meeting on there. If they're approved, then again, we'll be at 907. I'm also putting the school roof on it because presumably we're going to be talking about having a warrant article for the school roof. But I haven't put any numbers except for we estimated 750,000 last year. So I'll keep that there until we get the engineering report. And I went back and I looked, and just remind everybody, the select board has already approved, or actually the select board approved 300,000 of ARPA funds, and 200,000 is coming from the state. So we have $500,000 to apply to the school roof. So, right now, capital stabilization is at 246,000, stabilization is at 307 for a total stabilization balance of 553. And at the end of this special town meeting, if everything's approved, 907, that'll put us at about 1.5 million in cash. So just want everybody to know, because of the special town meeting, I put that together.
Yeah.
If questions come up from the audience, from the voters, then we can give this much information. I don't know if you folks thought there's anything else that we should include in that.
No, Bob.
Yeah, just on that point, George, it was very useful for me when we had the spreadsheet in front of us last year before town meeting to understand what our cash position was in our other reserve accounts. Now, what's a little bit blurry to me is when we voted to, when we had in that spreadsheet, we had put what you said, $750,000 in parentheses for the school roof. That didn't affect the bottom line. That was just a notation on the spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. We had it there in our
That should be
estimates
clear to
of our
all of us.
cash balances would be.
Right,
But they're clearly different because that never got voted.
because when we were doing our calculations, we were sort of making a mental note at the very least that money was spoken for, at least
Right, so
potentially.
the schedule I created this year doesn't include any balances coming out for the roof, but I'm going to put it on the list. And at some point we'll talk about it. If you want, I can show you real quick. It won't take me 2 minutes to
If
show
you
you.
could send it to me, that'd be
If you
awesome.
do that, I think it'd be helpful, George, if you could pull it up. Yeah.
Okay. Let me know when I can take the screen.
Oh, I should help.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Right. So does everybody see this schedule?
Yeah.
This is the one, I'm going to just show you last year's schedule. And we had made some assumptions about the school roof,
Right.
and we made predictions about what our ending balances would be for these three funds. For this year, what I did was I went to the expense report and I lifted these numbers off the expense report, which are very close to what we predicted last year. Without the school roof that never happened. And then this is the certified number we got from Becky for free cash. So this is currently our free cash situation. These two numbers are on the expense report, and this is what was just certified. And so remember what the schedule does. We list the warrant articles. And right now we've got 2 special town meeting warrant articles and the dollar amounts. And then we add up what is approved, and we're assuming that these are going to be approved for free cash. And I'm not making any predictions about what our increases will be to free cash or transfers at this point.
Right.
So here's our beginning balances. So far, we're taking out the 151. So the numbers I'm just reading to everybody, these would still be our balance after the special town meeting. This would be the free cash stabilization balances, excuse me. And this would be the free cash balance after the special town meeting. And then as far as the schedule goes, I put on the roof, but I haven't touched any of the cashes. I've left them blank. I put in the $500,000 because we know that's what we have from these two sources. So this number will change based on the engineer's report. And then we'll have to decide how we're going to close the gap between that and the 500. If you want, I can just take this right off before I send it to everybody, or I can leave it here because it really doesn't change what our response to the voters would be, and that is, here's what our balances will be if these 2 warrant articles were approved.
Yeah.
I think it's
Well, we do expect that we're going to have a roof project, right? By town meeting, by the annual town meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
So I guess for that reason, I'd suggest leaving it on here.
Yeah, I mean, what we don't know is what the engineer is gonna kind of estimate the project's gonna cost, and then whatever the difference is between that amount and the $500,000 that's already been allocated for this is gonna be a decision for us about how we're gonna fund that difference. Susie?
I think it's important to make sure people understand this is a working document. This is not a decision. And so I think it's important to include the pieces that we're thinking about, but also make it clear that, where the 250,000 in borrow, that's just a possibility. It's not a decision.
Well, I'm sure on the screen, I can't find my raise hand button.
Okay, go ahead.
If I may respond to what
Yeah,
Susie
please,
said.
George.
Well, I was just going to say, this is really not something I expect to hand out at town meeting. This is just for us to reference.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to tell everybody is what the impact of these warrant articles would have on our cash, where we are, where we'll end up, and then let them know we are anticipating other capital purchases. We know for sure one would be the school roof. And I wouldn't go beyond that unless
Right.
people really want details, which I don't know what else we could give them at this point.
Yeah. Hey, George, can you just verify one thing for me, which is I'm assuming the starting cash balances at the bottom of this chart are assume the purchases of what was allocated at last year's town meeting, correct?
That's correct.
So the
because-
dump truck funds are already out of this. And the whatever it was, the cruisers and the SUV, all those things have been pulled out of those starting balances that we're seeing, correct?
Yeah, I believe that is true because when I took the school roof out and I
Yeah.
looked at these balances, 245 and 306,
Mhm.
we're 245 and 307. And,
Right.
slight difference on the stabilization, might have been interest that it earned during the year.
Got it.
So that tells me that all these other items were indeed transferred out, and they should be. I think that's what the accountant does at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
that's what she's been completing to be able to show the right numbers.
Okay,
Right, and so I picked them right off our expense report, and they're up to date on the expense report.
right. Okay. Okay,
free cash isn't shown on the expense report, but Becky's statement, her schedule that she showed us, the final approval was where I got the free cash, which we all know is right now.
Yeah. So just actually on the subject of the school roof project, Becky, is there an update on the engineer's report, or is that?
The update is they're coming tomorrow.
Okay, they're coming to look at it. I mean, to
Yeah,
do
they're
their
coming to
annual
get up
inspection.
on the roof and do the stuff that they've been trying to do for 3 months.
Okay, got it.
Hmm.
All right.
Will they have an estimate in time for town meeting?
No,
Not special town meeting, but you're talking about annual.
Well, I'm talking about town meeting. I mean,
Yeah,
the rate they're going, I mean, this should have been done in September.
Yeah. And what's taking so long, Susie? I mean, I'm Becky.
They were trying to stick to Wednesdays, so there wouldn't be students there, and we have had a washout of Wednesdays, and the good Wednesdays we have been over holidays when they were either closed or not available. So they are coming tomorrow.
Oh,
okay,
So it's really not, so it sounds like it's not sort of their negligence, it's just, it was a scheduling sort of issue, lots of different kinds of delays that the
Yep,
school.
and I believe they'll be just in perfect timing to have construction estimates for annual town
Okay,
meeting.
good. All right.
Oh.
Okay, Bob?
I'm just pointing out that what's obvious to everybody is that they better hurry up before that roof is totally covered with a foot of snow, you know?
oh, yeah.
They've been lucky, we've been very lucky, we've had very little snow cover on the roof, but I don't know, there's probably snow on there now. I know there's on my roof on the north side, but
I
Hopefully
sent them
they can-
pictures of the current conditions. And
but I hope
they've
can- hope they can
been
do the job.
extremely frustrated, as I have been, so they have figured out how to handle it.
Great. All right. George, at some point before special town meeting, if you could send this spreadsheet or a PDF of it,
Yeah, I'll send a PDF of this page.
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, just so we have it as a reference to help us
Yeah,
answer any
exactly.
questions.
Yeah.
Just think it'd be helpful for us to have in case questions come up, which I think was your intention. Okay, thanks for doing that, George. That was,
You're welcome.
thanks for plugging in these new projects. I see a community member, Mary Lou Conca. Did you have a question or comment about this
Yes,
agenda item? Yeah, go ahead.
okay. Hi, my name is Mary Lou Conca, C-O-N-C-A, for the note taker. And I want to first thank Mr. George for including the school roof in your calculations. That's a really good thing. I have a question for Becky. I would like to know who it is who's finally coming out tomorrow. And if I understand everything that you all have been discussing, you are putting in money that as a finance committee of a town, you have okayed for the full repair of the school roof. But at this point, you just don't have an amount.
Yeah, so I mean, I can answer part of that, and then Becky, if you had other things you wanted to add. So we, at annual town meeting, there was a warrant article related to this topic. We allocated, do folks remember, was it $60,000? I'm trying to remember what the engineer.
Yes.
Yeah, it was $60,000 for the first step in the process of repairing the rest of the roof, which was an engineer's report, which is who's coming tomorrow. And that report is going to, among other things, produce an estimate of what the construction costs will be for the actual repair of that section of the school roof that, you know, hasn't already been done. And we've already have $500,000 allocated for the project through use of ARPA funds and some state funds that our representative was able to advocate for our town for. And so there will be an estimate by annual town meeting for what the construction costs are and whatever additional funds are going to need to be raised or allocated for that project, where FinCom will have a recommendation for how to do that. Anything else that folks want to respond? Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay, so I think that was kind of wraps up this topic. Any other questions or comments about it? Again, thanks.
I was curious what company was finally
Oh, yeah.
chosen. Yeah.
The engineer.
The name of the engineering firm is Gale Associates.
Gale Associates. Are they out of Weymouth?
I don't recall, but I believe so.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next topic on the agenda was an OPEB review. And Mary Lou, if you get a chance to just lower your hand, just so I'll be able to know that it's not a current question. All right. So Becky, were you able to?
I found George's last review, but I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I stopped looking when we were talking. But was there reason to find the review from
I don't think it's my review they're looking for. When the person asked the question, I think it's the actuarial report you were asking about.
Yeah, or the PowerPoint that was shared or used for the briefing they provided to us.
Yeah, Parker's. See, they're looking for Parker's stuff.
And maybe I wonder if it's possible that they didn't actually email it, but we just
No, we have it.
we have it, right?
I looked at it because I needed it, because I also did a little work on that schedule.
Yeah, I have a lot of emails that are jibber jabber. I think this might be it. I have a copy of the OPEB University.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is what we wanted.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Here's what we're talking about OPEB in 2020, what I'm calling municipal jeopardy. How can we reduce costs?
Did you guys want to hear the OPEB University?
I don't think so. Yeah.
No, but there was a summary document that went with it.
I'm
We've been around
I'm
since
gonna keep
1998
looking.
doing actuarial and management consulting work. Provide services to about 500 municipalities across the U.S., including about
Okay.
You know what? I've got an OPEB folder. I think I have it. OPEB presentation 322. I'll send it to everybody
Yeah,
right now.
that'd be great.
Okay.
Bob?
I just want to say while we're waiting, my recollection of the uptake from that whole thing was that we were in pretty good shape and that our track was he liked what we were doing, and we should continue to on the same track, which I think was like $50,000 last year. So I think that was the takeaway from it, as far as I recall. I don't know if anybody remembers it differently.
All right.
I found a summary.
Well, here it is. I'm sending it right now to everybody. I'm just replying to the meeting notice email.
Right.
So you're going to see Becky's FinCom on January 10th email coming from me right now, and there's an attachment that probably
Right.
I think it's what you all are interested in.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, it's got the summary numbers, it's got the OPEB liability.
Great.
George, wasn't there some sort of disagreement we had with them? There's something way in my memory, back in my memory, which isn't all that great anyway, but back then there was some discrepancy between what we wanted and what they were suggesting. But this has probably been resolved in that report that you're sending on or you're sending around to us. I can't quite recall that detail, but I remember something that sort of got us going.
That we disagreed with the actuary?
There was something about their suggestions versus our needs or wants. I had to do with the 50,000. I just can't quite remember the detail. Maybe I'm wrong on this. But you know, it was resolved at the end, and I think the summary will probably reflect what we all agreed to.
Did you send it, George? Because I didn't get it yet.
I did. Oh, yeah. Let me look.
While we're waiting, Susie, did you have a?
Yeah, I'm looking at the minutes from March 22nd that AJ took, and you know, it's a summary.
Here's the
and
presentation.
I find it helpful. There's really no loose ends in this minute. This is the minutes from March 22nd, 2022.
Okay, great, thank you. I was trying to remember the date.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
Bob, I didn't send it. I ended up sending it to the wrong person. I'm gonna,
I have the summary report from last year
Oh, great.
from him.
All right.
is it called presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the one. Yeah, I replied to the meeting invite, which means it went to the town clerk. Sorry.
She gets the most random stuff. It's I
Well, I did tell her to
couldn't
ignore it,
believe
so
it. It's half of my emails plus.
she's got enough junk for me. She knows to ignore what I send anyways.
Okay, so this is the report from last year.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, yeah, and that lines up with the minutes I'm looking at as well. All right, so as of June 30th, 2021, we were what, about 20% funded? Yeah.
And what's our current balance?
I'm assuming, Jim Hemingway?
Yeah, I think I remember what it was. Isn't OPEB, they are these folks in Worcester, I believe, and they actually invest the money, don't they, in various
No, they don't invest the money, Jim.
They don't. I thought there was something about the money.
All right, so this is
town money being invested in a rather speculative way. I thought
so I'm just going to read from the minutes, Jim. It's I think this is what you're referring to. Jimmy Hemingway asked for more information about how Shutesbury's OPEB funds are invested. Parker responds that Shutesbury is invested in a portfolio that assumes an anticipated return rate of 5.65%.
Yes, that's
Ryan added that the funds are invested through Bartholomew Investments.
I recall, and we never did get a rundown on what they were invested in, and that may have sounded just great back then, but this has been a very bad year for investments. So I'm sure that we've lost a little bit, or things have been backtracked a little bit as a result of what's happened to the markets this year. But the investments are in stock market, various stock market funds, as I recall. So there is a bit of speculation in all of this, which is not a problem if things are going in the right direction, of course.
Well, and it is kind of, I mean, this is a long-term.
Yeah, it's a long term. I think things go up, things go down, and back and forth, and one thing or another. So because the jump here I'm looking at is a $300,000 jump from 20 to 21, and so that's clearly due to the strength of the market at that time. But I'm sure this year will not look quite as good.
Susie and then George.
And we know that the municipalities are restricted about what kind of investments they could make, and that point was made last time. And that this is a company that follows those municipal laws.
Well, Susie, if there was a $300,000 jump, they were not investing them in treasury bills. Believe me, they were.
That is not an investment.
That's the liability.
That's the liability. That's not an investment number.
The
It's
one you
in-
want to look at is fiduciary net position. That's the cash balance. The
That's-
712
That's what we funded to date, is the 7.
plus the interest that the
all
funds
right,
have earned,
okay.
yes.
As of June 30th, 2021.
But it's still
Yeah.
good growth because it was the 50,000 plus it's a $90,000 change.
That's right. And that's to Jim's point. It did very well that year.
Yeah.
And
George,
I
go ahead.
raised my hand if
Yeah,
I
you-
can talk now.
Yeah, you can, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you look at the expense report, as of the start of this year, the OPEB balance went from 712 to 860. It's currently 860, or it was 860 at the beginning of the fiscal year. So there was another very big jump, and it was because 2021 was an excellent year for returns.
Mhm.
And
No, the early part of 2021.
all of 21 was
Oh,
great.
okay,
In fact,
okay, oh, yeah, this is just, I'm thinking 22. All right.
and remember, this is fiscal year, so this is June 30 balances. So
Yeah.
all of 21 was a great year. The market peaked on the first day of 22, and then it tanked from that point on. 860 as of June of 2022 is a really good number because a lot of the market was deflated at that point in time. So where it is, who knows? But it has continued to grow is the point I want to make.
Could you give that number again? 862, you said?
$860,023. And that's on the expense report. If we do go over the expense report today, I don't know if it's on the agenda, but I can show you that number, but it's on
Okay.
there.
Great, okay. All right.
But that's a number as of when? When would that number have been?
Beginning of the
Generated.
fiscal year, that would be June 30th. Becky, correct me if I'm wrong, but it usually gets updated only once a year.
Well, then the 50,000 is added.
Right, the 50,000 would be in there. That's true. So 860 is really 810 without the addition.
Right.
Yeah, we should remember that. And that 90 that Becky mentioned earlier was really a 40,000 gain. So it's more like an 8% return or 7% return from the previous year.
Yeah.
George,
Susan-
what page- sorry.
Sorry, Becky, did you?
I was just wondering what page numbered the OPEB, because I found the word OPEB, but it wasn't the account, so I'm a little confused. Where,
Here, I'll find it. Yep. Give me 1 second. It won't take me but a minute. It's
Okay.
on page 18. Yeah, let me know if that's not it, because we know sometimes I think I got it and I don't, but it's called OPEB Trust and it says 860.
It sounds like it's the right ballpark.
yep,
so-
that's definitely it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so let's go to Susie, then Bob, then Jim Hemingway.
I remember one of the discussions we had before last year's report was if we move to $1 million, the gain
Mhm.
changes more rapidly. And so at the point before we saw last year's numbers, that was possible considerations. Then we saw last year's numbers and the discussion was, well, let's see how this pans out and not consider at this time the move to get our assets up to $1 million. And so there's a table that shows what happens when you have your assets at $1 million. And so I think in terms of discussion points, at some point we might want to revisit it, but the last time we talked about it, which was less than a year ago, the idea was to sit with what we got and watch it for a bit.
Mhm.
That's my
Yeah.
remembering.
Yeah. Bob?
I wanted to ask Becky, I know last year I was involved in the discussion. Becky pointed out, if my memory serves me well, that the treasurer was responsible for making the calls on how the money was invested in this fund. And I was a little concerned that he might decide to take more risks with the money than I thought were reasonable. And I'm a little concerned. I'd like to know what the rules are so that I could understand it better. So if you could link me up with a place where I could find out what those rules are, what those guidelines are, because, you know, the FTX thing, you know, there was some pension funds that were highly invested in that, you know, and that was if it was my pension, I'd be very upset. It was a very risky bet, so I'd like to know more about that. If you can fix me up with a link or something, Becky, I'd appreciate it.
Well,
Okay.
we're going to be meeting with him, right, for his budget review. Do you
Not
think?
till February now.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it was supposed to be this meeting, I think, but it got moved.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, maybe we could talk
It-
about that with him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's, yeah, towns are very restricted in what they can invest in for that very reason, Bob. So,
That's good. That's good news.
All right. Jim?
Yeah,
Right.
I remember quite clearly, Ryan used the word when we referred to what Bartholomew was doing with our money as aggressive. And I know exactly what that term means in terms of investing. And Becky, I think that we'll just have to wait until, I guess it's June of this year to find out how well they did in 2022, because that's going to tell us an awful lot about how well our money is being managed. And I think until then, we might as well just sit down and just wait for how they manage, how well they did during this during the 2022 year, which will be quite a test.
George?
22 is only 1 year though, Jim. I think, when you're doing a long-term analysis, you just have to make some assumptions about what your returns are going to be. You can look at history, and in this actuarial report, they actually did tell us what their long-range anticipated average return will be, and we should just use that. It's a conservative number.
Yeah.
If on the report that we looked at last year was 5.65%, which is, I think, a fairly conservative number. So,
Yeah.
I don't think waiting to hear how it did in 22 is really going to determine anything in terms of the assumptions we need to make in terms of analyzing this. I understand the point. I agree with you to some extent, but you just have to kind of decide what's a reasonable assumption, because we're doing an analysis that spans decades.
Well, I know it's long-term and all of that, but I think it'll be just interesting to see what happened in 2022, since I'm looking at, what you're putting up on the screen here shows 2020, 2021. So we'll see what happens if in this upcoming year. But I just remember Ryan using the word aggressive, and that didn't bother me too much at the time because things sounded and looked pretty good. But we just have to watch it. That's all.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that at least the 2 or 3 years we've discussed so far, those funds have outperformed the 5.65% assumption that we've been using in the analysis. George?
Well, the key measure is, are they doing as well as the S&P 500? And 5% indicates, I don't know, probably that they're working with probably with I don't know, what am I trying to say? Local money. In other words, with forget it.
Well,
George.
Sorry to be
No,
so.
but Jim, the reason I raised my hand is what they're going to do is they're going to invest based on when they anticipate using the funds. They do have restrictions, I'm sure, but also once they get a handle on how we're going to use the funds, when we get to the point where we're going to start using those funds, they're going to have to start moving some of the money into more liquid, less risky investments to preserve that portion of the funds. So our returns are going to go down, and it may be that we're not getting S&P 500 returns now because we're limited in how we can invest, and we have to leave a certain percentage in bonds or cash so that there's some liquidity in the event that we need it. So I think S&P 500 returns is a big ask, and I doubt that we're going to ever get that level of return. Especially as we get closer to using it, because we're going to have to, just like people who retire, start setting some of that money into safer investments, which of course use lower returns.
Well, 5% suggests that what I was trying to say was municipal bond funds. That's probably where a lot of the investment is right now. That would be my guess.
It could also be a mix. Cash was paying less than 1%. So if they're assuming 8% in the stock market and 1% in the bond market
Mhm.
or zero, which was what it was,
Mhm.
then, maybe that's how they get to 5.9.
Yeah, well, last year cash went way up. As soon as as soon as the Fed started raising interest rates, the return on cash, treasury bills and stuff like that, is now up to 4 to 5%. So I don't know. We'll see.
Jim Walton?
Yeah, I mean, looking at a 5 to 6% appreciation long-term, that's not aggressive. I'm not sure what words Ryan used, but 5 to 6% isn't aggressive.
Well, I think that the issue is, I'm sorry, AJ.
Yeah, go ahead, Becky.
So the issue is that the actuarial studies that he's doing, he's using a very, very conservative number. So then he comes back and tells us we have to put a whole lot more money in it. But if we used which George played around with, using numbers that are closer to reality, we're not in a bad position.
Yeah.
But if you just use, the 4 or 5%, we were not looking good. It looked like we would never get to $1 million. So I think that was part of the argument, that it should match. The modeling from Parker needs to be closer to reality.
So I think kind of based on this discussion, though, I mean, one kind of takeaway here is that it sounds like we're all pretty comfortable with us maintaining the level of contribution that we've been making, I think, over quite a long period of time now, right? For that $50,000. I'm not hearing any advocacy for changing that amount, either up or down. Is that fair?
I would,
George?
I would suggest that we look at the model that we have.
Mhm.
And what I would suggest doing in that model is changing it up slightly so that we have the starting balance, we have the 50,000 going each year, we got an estimate for investment earnings. Let's see what our annual OPEB commitment is in terms of the health insurance and any other insurances we're paying for current retirees and future retirees. Put that number in coming out and see if we continue at 50,000, at what point do we run out of money?
Mhm.
Do we run out of money?
Right.
And I think if we look at that, we can decide, do we want to continue at 50,000? Do we want to lower it? I'm hopeful that in the course of the next 5 to 10 years, we can start decreasing the 50,000. I would like to find the point when it's okay to do that safely, because we're going to need to do something with all these rising costs in other parts of the budget. And this might be an opportunity for us to save some money. So I think looking at that analysis before we make that decision for the budget, I think we should put this on a warrant, on a meeting agenda for a future meeting. It won't take me long to put the numbers together. And given this conversation, I think within 15 minutes or less, we could make a decision about that. But I think it would be better to do it with a table in front of us.
Okay, good. Yeah, so obviously we're going to have those meetings kind of later in the budget process when we're actually finalizing things. And so I'll make sure we review kind of this model before making a vote or discussion about that.
And it won't take me long to set it up. So I'm going to set it up in the next week. So whenever it's on the agenda, I'll be ready for it.
Okay, great. Thanks, George.
George, didn't
Jim,
you?
go ahead.
Yeah, George, didn't you set up such a such a thing last year? I remember you going through.
Yeah, we're looking
on
at
the screen.
it's being shared right now.
Yeah,
Jim?
I know. But you went through all of this before, showing if you change this, this happens over here. I remember quite an elaborate presentation on your part.
I think there's
I'm
just
gonna
new
simplify it for the
information
next-
to update, right?
Yeah, all right.
Right, new balances and.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about, Jim. I'll be able to fix this up. I might simplify it a little because our situation has changed. I think it's actually easier for us to make a decision. So I'm going to change it just a little, but I think it's going to make great sense. And again, I think, we'll know at that point, do we want to continue the 50 a year? And for how much longer do we think we really need to do that? And maybe we start stepping it down, if not this year, in 3 or 5 years, who knows?
Yeah.
aren't we still way ahead of most other towns in the state? It seems to me that was one of the points that kept on coming up, that our contributions had actually been much more than the average small town or even mid-sized town in Massachusetts. Wasn't that the case?
So I think Parker, the Parker presentation said that 81% of municipalities were less than 20% funded, which is where we were as of June 21. So that
We
was the,
were out in front at first, Jim, and we haven't maintained it.
A lot of other towns have started to make big contributions.
Bob.
Yeah, I just want to make a point that I'd like, when we do have this on our agenda, I would like us to examine the assumptions, because all these numbers are predicated on certain assumptions. And we should examine these assumptions critically and evaluate those assumptions, because I mean, after all, these are just keystrokes, because we don't know really what's going to happen with the cost of medical care. We don't know what's going to happen with our budgets and so forth. But yeah, I think we should look at the assumptions make sure we all understand what the assumptions are in this document going before they're extrapolated into the figures in the spreadsheet. Does that make sense?
They'll be on there. There's two major assumptions. They'll both be on there.
Yeah, interest and how much we
And,
contribute.
and what our annual cost will be. And both of those were provided by the actuaries.
Yeah. The only thing I didn't see just on your spreadsheet that you just pulled down was it looked like you were making the same assumption. You had the same return rate for both the fund when it's less than $1 million and over $1 million. And I, just to connect this to Susie's point earlier, I think there was maybe some discussion that we would earn better returns once we exceeded that $1 million criteria.
Yeah, that's correct. When we initially set it up, the treasurer at the time was telling us that when she has over $1 million, she can get a higher return. But when we talked to Parker, he said that, we should be able to get the same return at all levels. And we're almost at $1 million anyways. So pretty much for the life of this analysis, most of the years in this analysis will be there. But Parker seemed to indicate that we can get that 5.6 rate no matter what our balance is at this point. So that is an assumption that's probably changed over time.
Just a note, just briefly, I manage my measly IRA, and I have an S&P 500 fund. My S&P 500 is down 18.8% in 2022. So there's your assumption of the S&P being a marker for what we can expect.
Well,
Nobody's going to predict what's going to happen. What predicted this, and I wish I knew someone that could predict next year, but I don't.
Well, I would just say this: the spreadsheet, we can change the interest rate and watch what happens. So we can make it 0, we can make it 3, we can make it 5, and in reality, it might mean 1 year of extra solvency, maybe 2 years of extra solvency, or it might be 10. We'll see that, and so we'll know. It might be that the degree of changes that we make on our assumption for interest rates is not that material for the next 20 years. We'll see, so we can definitely play with different interest rates.
Yeah, we'll see.
Jim Walton.
Yeah, there's some discussion here about how we might get a higher return with over $1 million. I recall a lot of that discussion last year. That was more around borrowing, when we were looking at borrowing for capital projects. So if we get above a certain borrowing, weren't we talking about possibly getting a lower rate at higher borrowing, at higher amounts of borrowing?
Yeah.
That's not what I was referring to. It was like 2 years ago or more. It was about having that investment at over $1 million would give a different return. So I wasn't talking about the borrowing cost or something.
Okay.
I think we should end this discussion because there's a lot of speculations. It's of high interest to some people, but I don't think we're going to get any farther, and we have other things to do.
When we have the spreadsheet, we can ask the questions and change the numbers, and then we're going to see. It's all going to come right into view.
Yeah, and I think this was helpful just to kind of bring everybody back to speed. It had been a while since we talked about OPEB, so I feel like we're sort of primed for that discussion when we've got an updated model. Okay, so I think I'm ready to move on. Before we get to committee updates, let's talk about sort of a couple topics that folks suggested. So, Bob, did you want to kind of share your at least thoughts or interest in talking about sort of FinCom's, I think you said FinCom's role in advising on how the town utilizes kind of various federal funds for different projects? Is that, was there a larger point you wanted to make?
Well, I think pretty much what you just said. I think that there should be a process set up by the FinCom, working together with the select board so that we can review and evaluate the way this money is being spent. So I think that, you know, this is a new thing, having this kind of cash coming down the pipeline to the town. There's been a lot of money spent, a lot of decisions made without our input. I think that we have a role to play, and we should have a process that includes our public comment at our meetings and our own comments and our input into, just like we recommend a town meeting about articles that go to the town meeting that involve financial implications. I think these grants have very profound financial implications for the town. And I believe that we should have a role in it. And so I think that the committee, if we make a motion or if we have some understanding or an agreement that we should, then we should make a motion to that effect and make it known to, you know, town officials that this is what we'd like to see. So I just wanted to get the ball rolling and have a talk about it and see what other people thought, other committee members thought about this, but it seems to me obvious that we should have a role in it.
So I think there's sort of one step that I'd like to see, which is just see if there's a document that actually kind of literally lists all of the decisions and allocations that have been made to date in utilizing these funds. I think that would be just kind of useful information for the committee to have. So I don't know if that's something that we can ask the select board to provide. Becky, if you think that's an appropriate request, I think it would be useful just to see literally a list of what, you know, kind of what funds have been allocated for what projects. And you know, I think, yeah, I mean, so I think there's that sort of data kind of collection task that would be helpful. Jim Hemingway?
Yes, well, as I recall, a short time ago, Susie was the one who suggested that we asked for this information, and she said in writing. And I don't, Susie, have we had any, or have you had any response to that? Because at least if we got something in writing, we'd know what was going on.
I did not get an email to Marianne until after Christmas, and she said she would put it on her to-do list. That was only in reference to the spending for Lotto 32, which has different funds that have been applied to those costs. So I will follow up and see if she has that list prepared. We also did see a list. Oh, I maybe it was when I was at a select board meeting. Yeah, so there is a select board list of costs. And then I also wanted to remind people that at the beginning of ARPA funds, the select board solicited input for what people thought those ARPA funds could be allocated for. So there was that part of the process quite a while ago now.
All right. Jim Walton?
Yeah, I guess at least my memory, I'm thinking of our last fiscal year. You know, we had some awareness within the finance committee of what was out there for ARPA and other related similar types of sources of funding. And I thought we looked at that as part of our capital planning project, because we even plugged in some funds into some of these capital projects.
Yeah, school groups.
And we proposed, and I think our proposals were accepted. So maybe I'm misunderstanding some of what we think we're missing here. But at least from my perspective, we have been involved with this process. We are aware of what's out there, resources, and we have looked at how to use those, at least. And I think last year is an example of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say from my perspective, I think sort of one thing that I don't think I personally have had always the clearest picture of is kind of what sources are available, have actually been allocated to the town. We certainly get updates from Becky during our meetings, but again, like just if there was a document that kind of summarized, sort of the total amounts for all of these different sort of funding streams that came into the town and what's been expended on what projects, something like that, I just think would be super helpful for me. Yeah, Becky, you got it. Well, you're saying it's in our expense report.
all the funds, all the money coming in, and how much, and we highlight the big ones.
Sure.
We have a town meeting coming up, and everybody knows the
Right.
largest expense there is for PFAS. And most of the funds, if you go through this, it gives a list in the projects that are passed by town meeting. All those projects are listed by name, so you can see them in the expense report.
Right.
So there aren't a lot of other money coming in. There is not a lot of other money coming in. ARPA has been,
Besides ARPA.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, if there isn't, then there won't be an issue. But let me just say, I read in the paper the last few days that there's a major infrastructure bill that was signed by the president recently that was going to result in communities across the nation getting significant money for infrastructure and other purposes. And we all know how politics works. There's going to be a lot of public involvement, and I think in the committee, in our democracy, we should have more involvement. It's better than less. And the impression I got was that the select board was the sole arbiter of how this money would be allocated, and we could apply to them. People in town, committee members, committee chairs, whatnot, could apply to the select board. I just think that it'd be more useful and more democratic for the finance committee to have a formal role like we do with the budget, for example, where we actually discuss and weigh in on some of these proposed allocations. I'm not talking about what's already water under the bridge or through the culvert or whatever, but what is coming up. If there is more money coming up, let's anticipate that now. Let's have a discussion and let's work with the select board to come up with a fair and democratic way to manage it. That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, Becky, did you have a quick response for what Bob said there? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
guess the concern I have in what Bob is proposing is this is infrastructure money, and most likely it could be one major project or more, but it's also capital. I think the finance committee over the last 5 years has had a few times where it strays from its bylaw and starts making decisions about capital. And I think that's not it's not in the finance committee bylaw. We have a capital planning committee. And I just want to be clear that if we talk about infrastructure money, and Bob's wanting to set the finance committee up as in a process fashion in allocating those funds, I'm not sure if it's appropriate at all. Because the finance committee is, unfortunately, even with the generator, it got down to micromanaging a department head's purchase. And I know everybody approaches it from we're being helpful, but that's not the finance committee's role. we have a capital planning committee for that purpose. So given what Bob has outlined, I just think you have to really think out how you approach the topic and make sure it's not just, that it strays too far from the charge. And the charge is clear, and the charge does not include federal grant money that comes in. The charge of the finance committee is budgetary.
I won't get into a debate with you now, Becky, but I just want to make a point that I do disagree with you about that. And
Could you just be clear on what you're disagreeing
I
with me?
think that because we at the Finance Committee are part of a check and balance sort of government that the small towns in New England, small towns in Massachusetts have had for hundreds of years, where we're not opposed. It's sort of like the federal government on a small, very tiny scale. We're not opposed to the other departments, including the select board, which is the chief elected officers in the town, or you who are there, basically work for them, or the department heads. But we represent the taxpayer, and we have to apply scrutiny to all proposals that have financial impact for the town. That's my view about what the finance committee's responsibilities are. And this large grants are coming in from the federal or state governments or from any other source have large financial impacts for the taxpayers and for the town finances. So therefore, they're part of our purview. That seems to me pretty clear. And
But
I know
Bob,
It's not stated in our bylaws.
it's not stated, but it's certainly implied, and it's in there.
Well, that's why we need to talk about it more.
Okay, and I've read a lot on this subject, and a lot of this is interpretive. Different finance committees behave differently across the state. Different people that lecture us at these finance committee meetings and associations have different interpretations of how proactive and how active finance committees should be. Different sized towns have different ways of operating and all that stuff. I'm
Yeah, and
proposing
different bylaws.
right. So,
So
but Bob, can you just kind of clarify for me, and then I see some hands, so I do want to get to them, but I think, is it fair to say that what you're advocating for is simply sort of a guidance function, that we could be making recommendations about whether this is a worthwhile use of those funds? You're not actually suggesting that we have some role, some decision-making role.
no, I
about
don't
whether-
think we have the authority to make it that
Yeah,
decision.
right,
You're absolutely
okay.
right. But
All
just like town meeting or any other thing like school budget, we have a very important and serious advisory role to play in the formation of that budget.
Right.
And if you look at the Amherst budget that's recently been talked about with vis-a-vis this track, the Finance Committee of Amherst went ahead and they advised that a certain amount of ARPA money go to the track, and they were part of the process. They were just part of the process, working together with the other town officials. And I think that's what I'm proposing, not proposing that we have authority to dictate any of this, but that we have concerns about this and we should be engaged and involved in it.
Yeah, along the lines of the role we played with the school roof, right? That was what you're describing is essentially what
Right.
happened with the school roof project. With
Yes.
like that the whole sort of movement towards resolving that issue and allocating funds, really kind of came from a discussions that kind of we had internally in our committee, right?
I think we certainly had a role in it, and we had disagreements about that as well. But as a committee, we had votes and we made recommendations.
Yeah.
And so,
All right, let me get to some of the other comment hands here. So Jim Walton and then George.
Yeah, again, I guess I'm a little confused on this. Ultimately, any spending is going to be decided by the members of the town, right? That show up at town meeting, right? Any spending, pretty much.
Not
Not really.
when it comes to
Not in this
grant funds.
conversation.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Not when it
The
comes to these
ARPA funds
grant.
were decided by the select.
If we allocate some ARPA funds toward a roof, and we weigh in that we think that there's a certain amount of this project should be supported by ARPA funds, that's the
That was a
finance
select
committee.
board decision.
Select
that's-
board.
that part of the funding for the school roof, for example, has already been, I think. the
It's
select
a-
board already
yeah,
allocated.
It's a decision that the select board makes, but we, the finance committee, will say we support or we support this warrant article, right? we support or we don't support.
Wasn't a warrant article.
You don't have to vote that money. The money is already, it's sort of like the CARES money. It's already in hand and it doesn't flow through the same warrant process.
So like, there'll be a warrant article presumably to allocate town funds for the portion of the school roof project that's not going to be paid for with ARPA funds or the funds that Comerford advocated for, right? So, but that warrant article is not gonna ask the town to approve the use of $300,000 of ARPA funds for that project.
I think the town, the town article will only involve our reserve funds or our levy. Is that true?
Correct. That's my understanding. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, George, and then Susie.
but that's a good point, Jim, that you bring up. There are certain types of funds, and that's what Bob is referring to, where funds are awarded to the town, and it is up to the discretion of the select board on how those funds are used. And so that's Bob's concern, is that we do, I don't know exactly what Bob's concern, I know what my concern is. We do long-range planning to some extent. We're looking at our capital purchases. We're figuring out what's the right way to use the capital purchases, and funds coming in from outside sources can be a way to supplement the way we fund many of our capital purchases. So although it's at the discretion of the select board, I do believe that, in many instances when the dollars are big, it would be helpful if the select board included us in the conversation so that we could provide some of the perspective from what we've seen. That's all I would ask. And that's what I would ask the select board is just, we know it's your discretion, but please consider including us in the conversation. We jointly meet with them, probably not enough, honestly. But we do jointly meet with them at least once a year. And I think they have a lot of responsibilities. We're focused on looking at the finances on a regular basis. They're not always able to do that. So we have something that we can bring to the table on these conversations. And so we would ask them to please at least consider including us on some of these items.
Yeah,
George,
I guess I would have thought that the like the PFAS discussion, we had that discussion with the select board, right? We went through that whole exercise with the select board.
well, that was it, the select board wasn't there.
They weren't part of that? Okay,
No, they weren't there at that noon meeting.
okay. All right, that was in preparation for to provide our input to the select board.
Yeah.
So we did give them input. They weren't part of our meeting, but we provided our input for them, which they were meeting later that day.
Right.
Yeah.
AJ,
Yeah, Becky, go ahead.
so, putting on my select board hat. So back in July, when we prepared to start ARPA discussions, I sent out announcements to all the committees and boards in town and invited all the committees and boards in town. All of you got invitations. Not a single one of you. I think Susie showed up. I don't know for sure, but I think she did, because that happened with 3 or 4 other events. It was only Susie that showed up. So I appreciate all this, but from that point of view, you guys didn't show up to be part of the conversation. So it goes 2 ways. The finance committee is key, and there's a lot of roles that that the finance committee and select board know how to intersect and know how to have their conversations. That was a new one. They did the best they could to invite everybody. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't feel like they were negligent and left you out. They didn't create a brand new process, but they invited and would have been receptive to all the ideas and concerns. And you could have heard all the people who came forward asking for things as they did. So now there's a master list. The funds are still not resolved. It's still open. But I'm just saying maybe the finance committee needs to be proactive in thinking what's coming up and talking about the issues that are at hand and figuring out what role they want to play in that process. And if it's a new process, make sure they reach out to the select board or whoever else you want a relationship with.
Yeah, that's fair.
So,
Susie,
uh,
oh, sorry, George, would you want to?
well, I put my hand back up again, just before Susie. I'll make it real quick. So I would just ask AJ, as the chair of our committee, when those notifications come out,
Yeah.
let's get them on the agenda and talk about them. Let's try and get everybody's consciousness, because we get a lot of emails, and, you know, I do think I remember that. I know I lobbied the select board on my own anyways about that, but that would be really helpful, AJ. And then the second thing is, yeah, no, that's it. That's all I'll say is Becky's point is relevant, but we just need to make sure that there's a little
Right,
enthusiasm or
intake.
some push.
we need to sort of insert ourselves in some conversation. So
Welcome.
if like what Bob was alluding to earlier, if there's some new source of funds for municipal funds for infrastructure projects coming down the pike, if something materializes there, then presumably there's going to be another kind of call for ideas about how to utilize those funds. And yeah, I think we should.
And the second thing I was going.
Yeah, I'll make sure we discuss it and that we are at least
Participate.
present for those discussions. Yeah.
And the second thing I was going to say, and I'll make it real short, is we should think about a regular communication with the select board on a regular basis in some way, just so we can talk about things. That's it.
That's a good idea. Susie?
I don't feel alienated from the select board for a couple of reasons. One, we share knowledge of the same committees, what capital planning is talking about, and Becky is a connection between them. I also think that the two funds that we've actually had to deal with, CARES Act and ARPA money, are new to everybody. They never handed out money like that before. Now they've handed it out, and they handed it out for because of a very specific scenario that was unfolding, which was COVID and the way towns were stressed. So yeah, it's a process, and the select board has a really important role to execute. I think sharing a chart of information is good, putting it on our agenda to pay attention, but I don't feel alienated from the select board. And I do feel that Becky has let us know what CARES Act money is doing and what the ARPA money is doing. And I trust the positions to be, that people are handling their position. And if we want to know more, fortunately, maybe the select board meets the other Tuesday that we're not here. And that's another way to get information. But I feel that Becky's done a good job letting us know what's out there and how, and we've utilized, our budget is affected by those things being taken care of by those other funding sources. So, you know, we're looking at the school because we have 300,000 of ARPA, and we knew that. And so I feel like there isn't an alienated position.
Okay. Bob, did you want to kind of wrap this?
Yeah,
discussion up?
yes, I would like to say, first of all, just to respond shortly to Becky, I'm trying to do what you're suggesting we do right now. I've been trying to talk about this issue since this money started to be discussed before it even arrived. Wanted to know how much money we were going to get, where it was going to go, how we were going to decide it. And I've been interested in this since day one. And as far as the letter that came out to us, yes, I do recall that. And I do remember thinking, well, I want this finance committee to be involved in a formal way. I don't want to be as an individual going there. We have a committee, we make deliberations as a committee, and we can't really even discuss these things without having a meeting. So I'm trying to bring up something slightly different from what was presented or offered to us. That is, as an involvement of the finance committee, working in a collaborative way with the select board and others to evaluate this. Now, if I assume there's going to be more money, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe there will be no more money. But I think
you're right.
I think it's an issue that I've been interested in. I've asked you about, and I've been interested in where I was promoting a whole building ventilation system. All know that I talked about that quite a bit, and that's not going to happen. The money's going elsewhere. Well, that's too bad as far as I'm concerned, because that would have been a perfect use for pandemic-related funds. But all I'm trying to do is introduce the issue to the committee now, Becky.
Understood. Yeah.
And so that we can be prepared to deal with this kind of issue more effectively.
All right.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah. And Mike Vinsky, if you can, I think you've got a question or comment.
Yeah, I have a comment. I just, I find it very odd that there's large amounts of money coming from wherever that's going to the town, and that the select board ends up being able to decide where that money is going to be going. You know, my feeling is that you guys, the finance committee, are the experts on the finances, and you ought to be the ones that are basically controlling this money and deciding where it should be spent. And the idea that the select board has invited all the boards and committees to come and give their input into how it should be spent, you know, just doesn't make sense to me. It sounds like, you know, well, here's a big pot of money. Let's find out how we can get rid of it. And if it'd been with the finance committee, then I feel it'd be spent a lot better and would be used in a manner that's going to be looking long range and taking care of issues that are a little bit more important than just trying to find a way to spend the money. Thanks.
Like a new roof for the school.
Yeah, the school roof is getting $300,000 of those funds, and that was something that we advocated for as a committee. So okay, let's move on to our next topic, which I think, well, actually, before we do committee updates, Susie had proposed an idea that we kind of draft a letter for our kind of local representatives. Is that something, Susie, you'd be willing to kind of spend some time on, with maybe some support from another committee member or two?
I'd like it to be from more than one. I actually sent a letter to Aaron Saunders as a person, not as a committee member.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the middle school roof, PFAS, the way MSBA decides you can put a pause on how roofs leak. And they have no control. Legislators don't control MSBA, but he said he was going to work with other legislators in the area. And it's interesting to think about. He has a district that has Pelham and Shutesbury in it, and he's called the Hamden district, and Amherst is a Hampshire district. So it's like in a regional school level, this is going to be interesting. So we would have some stakeholders that we should contact, but I would work with another person. I don't want to do this by myself.
Yeah. So Susie, I'd be, you know, open to kind of working with you, and maybe you could share with me the letter that you submitted, and then maybe we can sort of offline have a discussion about what a letter from our committee, what we would want it to communicate. Maybe we can bring that then to that draft to this committee.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. George?
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think that's a worthwhile project. One thing I just reading the papers recently is there's a lot of conversation at the state level right now about income taxes and revenue collections, because the state has surpluses, and legislators right now are trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. And I think they're losing, you know, they need to understand that even though the state is doing great, the towns are not. And this is an opportunity to use some of that extra funding and get it to the state. So I just bring that up so that I hope you include that. Susie, I see you're nodding your head, so that's great.
Yep. I think I also mentioned to them the stabilization money that they're talking about. State stabilization fund is really high. It's like, then put it on the roof. I mean, but anyways, I'll send AJ, and I don't think we need to have a posted subcommittee meeting. It's not that. We're just going to draft a letter and bring it back.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Great, good. Okay, thanks for the idea, Susie. All right, so committee updates. I guess I can start. Capital planning met and discussed there've been sort of 2 requests that have been made and a third that's kind of in process. The elementary school is having a huge problem with their phone system. I think it's like, Bob, maybe you can remind me. I think I recall them saying that like parents can't actually leave like a voicemail with,
Correct.
which seems insane, but I guess that's the state of the system right now. So I think Debbie Lee, the wonderful teacher there, is I think kind of taking the lead on researching some different options. And so where capital planning is expecting to meet with Jackie and I presumably Debbie to kind of see what specific proposals they want to advocate for. Anything on the school phone issue left out there, Bob? Oh, I think you're muted.
Parts to this, AJ. One of them is the operating system or the way that it doesn't function properly. And I think I wonder why Crocker couldn't do a better job there with voicemail. I mean, hell, it's pretty basic. But number 2, they also need equipment, which is
Like handsets, right?
So there's 2 parts to it. One is the operating system or the contractor who's going to provide services to support their communications, and the other is the capital part. And I think we're going to be able to sort that out at our meeting. I presumably what part of it would be a capital expense, what part of it would be a budgetary expense. Becky said that they were working on getting bids from people, getting proposals from Crocker and others. So hopefully we'll have more extensive information brought before us. But yeah, that's going to involve a capital expense. And it's going to involve a budgetary expense, or at least a special allotment of money to approve to get a new contract or a new service provider, right, Becky?
Yeah.
And the new service provider might be less, and it might be more, it might be the same. So
Right.
Okay, there was another request from Ellen. Yeah, go ahead.
the
Becky.
school also is requesting the kitchen floor
Oh,
and
yes, that's
I
right.
think one other room, and I can't remember what it is, but definitely the kitchen. I had a tour of the kitchen, but I think there's still one last room to complete the whole school, and
Yeah.
conference
Yeah.
room, maybe. I think it's the conference,
Room, because we did the door last year.
right?
And we're waiting on the door before they put the floor.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me about that. Then Ellen McKay also informed the committee that the provider that oversees the collectors software that town uses is selling their product to another company, and it's gonna basically require the town to utilize a new software system for the town collections. And after considering a few different options, Ellen's recommending that we use the Vadar, which we know about since we allocated, since it was, we're using it for our accounting. There's a module for town collectors that she's investigating. I think her preference is that since we have to use a new software, that we might as well use Vadar's product, since it will communicate well with the accounting software.
That's what's on the special town meeting, right?
That's
Yeah,
what-
that's
Yeah.
already being.
That's not
Oh,
gonna
yeah,
be-
you're right. Of course. What am I saying? Yeah. So, right. So of course, thank you. Yeah. So she was just bringing, I guess,
Yeah.
we're not, we didn't actually vote to recommend that or not, but it was
Yes, we
more
did.
information sharing.
Last meeting.
No, I know, sorry, I meant the finance committee, did, but the capital,
Right, capital
Planning.
planning.
yeah, but, yeah, no, you're, of course. And then we're expecting a request from the highway department, and Tim has got 2 machines, a backhoe and tractor, I think, that are in bad shape. And so he was still in the sort of research and kind of collecting information about costs. So we expect to get a request from him for those 2 items. Bob, what am I missing?
Well, I don't think you're missing anything, except that I want to bring the point up about the machinery. Now, Tim has yet to make a proposal. He doesn't have prices on this stuff, but there's some moving parts in this issue, as we all know, because Tim talked about the tractor before when he came to see us not too long ago. And, I'm concerned because Steve Sullivan threw around a number which was pretty amazing. It was the $200,000 that they got a price from the Deere dealer up in Greenfield for a new tractor. So, for me, I want to look at that old tractor. I mean, it seems to me we could rebuild that thing from head to foot for something short of $200,000. But Tim says it's only worth $7,000 fixed. But I don't care if it's worth $7,000 or if it's worth $70,000. If it only costs $2,500 to fix it, and it does the job, that's going to be an argument that or a discussion we're going to have. But I'm not sure about this, but we'll discuss it when we get a proposal. But I think that Tim wants to upgrade the tractor to a bigger tractor that can handle over the guardrail type of mower, because that little tractor that he has now cannot handle it. That's why we returned the over the guardrail mower that he bought, I believe. That one, it operates a deck mower and a sickle bar mower. And it's a nice little tractor, and it's definitely broken. The shuttle shit does not work, so it does not move, which is not useful. But, there's something to be said. Farmers, I read all the time about Deere, and Deere Company has been in a lot of trouble for high-tech tractors that can only be repaired by Deere personnel. And so there's something to be said for a 1995 tractor that doesn't have any digital controls, I mean. So anyway, we're gonna have to discuss this, and hopefully us on the capital planning committee can help Tim decide what the best, and the town decide what the best way to go forward is. Becky.
Yeah, Becky?
Yeah, no, Tim is reviewing all the issues, and the points that Bob is concerned about are the same points that Tim is concerned about.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, that's it from capital planning. Other updates, Jim Hemingway?
Yes, from the broadband committee, if you were.
Can I?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
my hand was raised for capital
Oh,
planning.
yeah, sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
okay, I'm sorry.
Maybe I'm out of protocol here.
No, please.
No, I just had a quick question, and that had to do with, do we have a target timing to meet with capital planning?
It's on Susie's calendar.
It's
Okay,
on
so we do have it.
February
Yeah, we're gonna meet with
23rd,
them.
So we meet with capital planning on February 23rd?
Yeah.
first,
Right.
21st.
21, yeah.
Right, thanks.
Mhm.
Sorry.
I just think
Bob,
it's
did you
quite
have something?
possible that we won't be ready, but we'll just see how things go.
Right.
Sorry, Jim, go, tell us about broadband. Yeah.
Yeah, so from the broadband committee, if you know anybody, friends, enemies, or the like, who have not set up an account with Sheld, their service is going to be cut off, terminated as of January 15th. There are actually quite a few people, about 30 or so. So you might want to spread the word. If they don't set up an account immediately within the next 4 days, they're going to, their fiber plug is going to be pulled. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be good for everybody to know.
Could you
Is there-
make a town announce on that? Can broadband put out a town announce?
I believe, well, the owner, those who are in arrears on this have been called and emailed and phoned and everything else. So they, I'm sure, know who they are. At this point, we've gone to a great deal of trouble to let people know that there is a January 15th deadline for those who haven't set up an account since September 1st.
I suspect you're going to hear from them after their services.
I bet we will here, especially since there will be a $49.95, reconnection fee as well applied to paying up for 4 months worth of service. So would be a pretty stiff amount of money. But anyway, that's the word from the MLP.
Could that impact our rates, Jim, if they end up with 30 people less than maybe what they were anticipating?
We talked to Sheld about that, and they of course have, because they bill out South Hadley, and now Leverett is part of the same arrangement that we have with Sheld. They have said that, well, this is a transition phase, and so some mix-ups are bound to develop, and they did not express any concern about the number of people who were in arrears. They said it was about normal for from their experience as a public utility. Okay. But yes, it could impact us if. But I think it's just a matter of people just not remembering to do this kind of thing. That's all. It's just part of the process.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Any other committee updates? Susie?
So I did forward a lot of information that was a result of the questions we raised.
Yeah.
And so people need to continue to process that information. And if you have more information you need from the school, elementary school budget, let me know and I'll get it to Caitlin.
All right.
Or
And
Jackie.
just to quickly review what you have shared, those enrollment numbers, I think you sent in an email, and also some spending numbers from January, right? From this, well, I guess are those, the idea was to give us the sort of the budget amounts in each of those categories. Right.
I think George asked for like an ongoing spreadsheet of expenses, so that's what they sent.
Yeah.
The one that's for January. Also, along with the enrollment, there was asked clarification on the choice, and I sent the email. I believe I sent that email.
Yes, you did.
That had the choice numbers and the question and answers. And then people should have gotten the U-28 and the SES draft that came out in November. So I believe that's all the documentation so far.
Okay. Bob, you're muted.
All right. I wanted to ask you, I appreciate you going and getting those enrollment numbers for us. That's useful. But it would make it clearer if we knew how many of those enrolled students were in preschool separately from the rest of the school, the K through 6. Is that something they could provide? Probably.
I think it's on that sheet. I think it's in that table.
The numbers.
I thought they had individual grade levels.
Talking about the school choice.
Oh, you're talking about the school choice. Sorry.
Yeah,
I thought
right.
School
choice. I think that obviously there are no school choice for pre-K, but I'd like to see that number pulled out so that we know what our actual enrollment in our K through 6 is. Okay. And what our choice students are.
I'm not sure what the question is.
The question is, how in a given school year, there's a total number of students and number of choice students, but I don't know how many of those students in that line are pre-K. It's not pulled out.
It says so. It's the one I sent after January 4th, and it has FY 13 up to FY 23. And it has pre-K, K1, it has the enrollment for each grade level. And then you want the choices broken down by grade level.
No, I don't. I just want the pre-K. So there's no choice in the pre-K, so I can just figure that out for myself. That's what you're saying?
Right, so there's 19 kids in pre-K in
Right.
as of October 2022.
Yeah.
Do you
Okay.
have that chart?
That table, Bob,
That's
has,
your email. I did
Yeah.
not see that, so my
yeah,
apologies.
there's a table in the email that Susie forwarded, and it has for like 10 years or so, it has the enrollment breakdowns by grade level.
Do you need me to send that to you again, Bob?
Let me just look on my email. You said
Yeah.
on the 5th,
January 4th email, Bob.
January 4th.
Yeah,
Okay.
that evening from Susie.
Yeah. Okay. Coming up. So many emails.
Well, if you need it, you can let me.
Okay. All right, I will ask, if I don't see it, I will get in touch, okay?
Okay. All right, so if you do end up with questions, we're trying to get the questions to them and answered before we meet with them, which is Tuesday, January 24th. So the next meeting, our next meeting.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, if everybody can, I feel like there's a lot more to absorb and read for the school, more so than any of our other departments. So if everybody can carve out some time in their schedule to really kind of go through the whole sort of mix of documents that Susie's forwarded or in advance of that meeting, that would be good. Okay.
Jim Hemingway, are
Yeah.
you asking about the school?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a minor question. I recall, does this Shutesbury Elementary School host Union 28, U28? They have some, I sort of recall the offices which were in Irving or Turner's being moved to the elementary school. Is that true?
They're spread out throughout the
Everywhere.
union. There are
Oh, okay.
offices in different places.
Oh, okay. I just wondered if we were sort of, how we were benefiting from that arrangement and if that was helpful in terms of the cost of,
Yeah, they
Oh, the student-
reduced the rent and that was, I think, gone in last year's budget. So you'd be able to
okay.
see it before
All
that.
right. I didn't realize that it was throughout the whole Union 28 as opposed to being just Shutesbury that was offering them the space that they
Yeah,
were
no.
using. Okay, thank you.
George?
I just wanted to say that, number one, Susie, I really appreciate the level of detail that they provided
Yeah.
us. And I thought also it was a very reasonable timeline that they did it. So,
Yeah.
if you get an opportunity, I think, please thank them for us. The one question I had was actually more for Becky. Looking at the enrollment numbers, I was a little surprised by some of the numbers I saw in the preschool and the kindergarten level in particular, but I do recall that Becky had told, because, in my mind, I'm trying to look farther out and see how the numbers are going to grow. And I do recall, Becky, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned last year that 2021 was a very large year for newborns in our town. And I was wondering if at some point you expected to have that same information for 2022.
I could ask, I'll ask Grace what it is for 2022. 2021 and 20 and 21, there were, I think 21, there were 22 children born in Shutesbury,
Oh.
which
Oh.
is huge.
Hmm.
But that's, COVID did it again.
No, COVID is doing a 23 baby boom right now. They're coming in like crazy now. In
Wow.
my own circle, there's like about 4 babies being born in January, February.
Yeah, it's true.
Me
I know
too.
a
I've
lot
got
of
two Shutesbury people I know. The people that live on both sides of me are both having children.
All
This-
right.
Did Katrina have hers already?
Katrina had hers, I think it was on New Year's Day. She had a
Oh,
little
okay, a boy or a girl?
a girl.
A girl, that's wonderful. Yeah, so that, that's the piece that would be helpful in terms of trying to project what our populations could look like in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, when that's going to hit the pre-K and K
Yeah,
enrollment.
and you really have to shepherd to make sure it does, and that you don't lose a lot of the kids to other programs. down the hill or choice. So
Had the choice.
Susie?
And the town report always has the births as one of the statistics they cover. And of course, it's working on a different calendar year yet again, but there's another source you can look at on a regular basis.
it comes out around the annual town meeting.
All right. Any other updates?
Personnel
Oh,
board
I
has another
want to,
meeting.
share
Yeah.
information. I don't think
Please.
I've shared with the finance committee. Tell me if I already did. A letter of award for the Green Communities Grant that I had worked on in the fall, early fall, summer and fall, was awarded for $178,000. 99,000 of that will go towards LED lighting at the elementary school, which I'm hoping will bring down energy costs after it's completed. I think there's $48,000 for weatherization at the school, and then there's different pots of money. The balance goes to all the other town buildings for weatherization. The other buildings already transitioned to LED lights. I think the highway still hasn't, but we couldn't go higher than the $100,000 for the LED lights.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
George?
So Becky triggered something in my mind. We have a new committee in our town. Not sure what their name is. I think Mike DeCuria has been a principal leader on
The
it.
Energy Climate Change Committee?
And I'm wondering if, A, does finance committee need representation on that committee? Or B, if we should be monitoring what they're doing or kind of get a sense of what they're up to see what the long-term impact or what the impact might be on town finances, because it seems like it
Well,
could
I
have an
would-
impact.
They had enormous requests that were withdrawn, but never fully identified for ARPA money. And now they have 3 subcommittees that are working, and they all were at the select board meeting right ahead of this in preparation. We thought they would have their proposals today, but they didn't. At the meeting next Tuesday, they will be presenting what they want to apply, how they want to apply for municipal vulnerability plan action grants. So that's a place you can hear about what they're doing or the select board minutes afterwards. But Michael DeCara, prior to the committee, I guess the committee was just put together. He worked on a grant that did not get funded last year from NVP. And so we're trying to hopefully tailor it and be more discreet and pointed and more limited in scope. They felt the scope that we had last year was really just trying to do too much. So we're hoping to get funding through the MVP grant for some of their projects. So that's the approach they're taking.
Does Mass Save have a program for municipalities like they do for homeowners?
No, I don't believe they do.
Yeah, they probably don't,
But that's why I was able, the whole process for the green communities, I was working with vendors from National Grid who do energy conservation work. And they're funded by National Grid and did it, and were the support for me. And that between that and getting FERCog to help me with the grant, we were able to pull it all together. But they did all the technical work on the grant, all the consultants, and that's, so they're not having Mass Save. We had this other resource that is different, but very effective. And we got the money. So now we can do that. They'll help us do the work.
Great. All right. Any other updates? All right.
How are the Celtics doing?
Not
better.
Yeah, they've had a good week.
They got a back-to-back coming up tomorrow and Thursday, the Nets.
Yeah, Thursday's a big game.
Yeah, but isn't the big guy, isn't he hurt?
Yeah, he is. Durant.
Yeah, he is. He's out.
Durant's hurt.
That's
Go up to
good.
Kyrie.
Mhm. All right. Thanks,
Is that-
everybody.
I make a
Okay, so
motion, we adjourn.
Oh, yeah, we gotta.
You don't want to talk about the Celtics anymore?
I've
Huh?
been talking about it for a while.
I'll second.
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Yes, you I.
Mosher, aye.
Bolton, aye.
Is everybody going to be there next Thursday?
I don't think I'm gonna be able to make it. But
I-
I'll, you know.
Yeah, I'm expecting to be there.
I'm expecting to be at the school committee meeting. One
Yeah,
meeting,
but I thought Becky said you'd be
Meeting
able to
tonight,
come.
Susie, that's
You'd be
it.
able to come.
one meeting a night.
That's our rule.
Come on, Susie. I
Not
had
Becky's
three the other
rule,
day.
my
Come
rule.
on, be an inspiration to us. Come on, Susie, inspiration. Do too.
We'll see you all.
We
All
got you
right, good night,
covered.
everybody.
Good
Have a
night.
good one.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.